Good day to all of you listening to this video, whether you are 18 or 80, whether black, white, colored, Indian or Asian, beautiful citizens and residents of this amazing rainbow nation. I am Elia Bordin, an Italian citizen and proud South African permanent resident. Today I wish to send a non-political message to all citizens of this country concerning the upcoming nationwide local government elections, also known as LGE, coming up on the 27th of October. While I will mention names of some political parties later, I hope that this speech will be viewed as apolitically as possible, as I will not provide my support to any of the political party I will mention. My message applies to absolutely anyone with any voting intention. Now, I'm sure you have heard many people encouraging you to go vote, but I will try to do more than just telling you that. I will provide facts, hypothesize figures, and implement some logic in this video to explain why you really should cast your ballot. No excuses. Let me start by the premise that you should not underestimate the power of this LGE. It is understandable that some of you might be frustrated and hesitant to go and vote, as these are not provincial or national elections. Local governments have the least power of all three spheres of government. However, these are still powerful elections for many reasons. For example, the various higher levels of government, including national government, are more likely to adapt their agenda according to those of the parties that have performed best in this local government election. This is because they hope to not lose votes at the next national and provincial election. This means that there may be an immediate impact on the country's overall trajectory, and that this impact will be measured according to which parties will come out as most voted in this local government election. So, let us look at some data, shall we? I will try to exaggerate a little bit in the underestimations that I'm going to make to try and avoid over-sensationalizing the data. Now, what you're going to be seeing now is an extract of the results of the vote count of the last National Assembly elections, which occurred in 2019. That same year, Statistics South Africa estimated that the population of the country was at about 58.8 million. Of those, about 39 million were at or above the voting age of 18 years, and as per the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs very rough estimate, about 35 million of those were citizens and 4 million were not. This means that about 35 million South Africans could vote in the latest national and provincial elections in 2019. However, that does not mean all the 35 million people were registered to vote, let alone actually voting. Indeed, according to South African electoral law, all South African citizens at least 16 years old can register with the Independent Electoral Commission, or IEC, to be able to vote in any election as soon as they are 18 years of age or older. At the 2019 elections, less than 26.8 million eligible South Africans were actually registered to vote, and less than 17.5 million of them actually cast valid ballots. So once again, underestimating the gravity of this scenario, we are presented with the following estimates. 17.5 million people voted, 9.3 million people were registered to vote but decided not to do so, and 8.2 million people were not even registered to vote, so obviously they did not vote. That means about half of the eligible population, about another 17.5 million people, chose to not vote at the last general election. However, for good measure, let us say that about 200,000 people could not vote that day because they were too old, sick, or perhaps at a hospital. Moreover, let us say that another 300,000 suffered a tragedy on that very day. Let's say someone in their family died or went to hospital. They suffered theft or mugging of some form, or carjacking, or they were involved in a car crash or similar predicament. They could not think about voting that day. Let us add another 1 million citizens who are involved in some form of activity that prevented them from voting, such as having long working hours and perhaps being a single mom or dad, so they have a family to get home to, such that they had no time whatsoever to go out and vote. Say another 2 million instead had similar issues when they had to register to vote. Maybe single mom, dad, or long working hours. Even if they wanted to vote, they couldn't, therefore, because they were unable to register in the first place, for whatever reason. And why not, let's exaggerate this figure further. Let's throw in another 800,000 people who are incapacitated to go and cast their ballot due to any other issue you can think of. Let's say they lost their ID card on the day or the day before, they had transport restrictions, natural disasters struck them on the day, you name it. This exaggerated statistic brings the voting population who willingly chose to not vote, down to only 13.2 million only. That means that according to my hypothesis that I'm bringing forward to you, some 13.2 million South Africans believe that their one single vote does not count towards changing their results, or have completely lost their faith in the power of elections and thus decided to not vote. Let us say those 13.2 million South Africans, however, all of a sudden change their mind and say, no, my vote does count, and decide to go out and vote. But let's say 200,000 of them cannot properly put an X on the ballot, such that their votes are therefore invalidated. This means that these 13.2 million newly decided voters would have actually added 13 million valid votes to the total votes cast, bringing the total to about 30.5 million valid votes cast. Let us put this number into perspective, considering that we had some 17.5 million only that cast their votes beforehand. And let us create some hypothetical scenarios, which, remember, these are totally fictional hypotheses based only on suppositions, and exclude some of the most prominent new political parties that were not included in the last 2019 election, such as Action SA, that may greatly shake these scenarios up. So, shall we take a look at what effectively is the debunking of my one vote does nothing theory? Let us begin with scenario 1, the rebellion against the governing party. Let's say that the average South African non-voter in 2019 was just angry with the ANC, nothing else. They just thought that the ANC was at fault for all the damage made to this beautiful rainbow nation in the last decade or two. They would vote for anything and everything but the ANC. This would mean that the ANC would gather the least of the new 13 million votes. The big gainers in this estimate are likely to be the next major parties: the DA from the Liberal vote, the EFF from various less fortunate communities, since that's where it has been most successful so far, the IFP from many KwaZulu-Natal voters, and VF Plus from the White Afrikaner vote. Many South African Christians, the largest religious group in this country, would also be upset about the perceived sinful path of South Africa and South African politics, and may end up voting for the ACDP. The result shows how, while the ANC is likely to remain the largest party, it is unable to govern on its own. Parties in parliament will try to find an alliance and create a different government. Even in the event that the ANC joins this hypothetical coalition, it will need to abide by other parties' wishes as well. Otherwise, those parties will pull out from the coalition and ally with others. Parties in this coalition will begin performing each to their best ability to try to become the next largest party at the next general election 5 years later. This will be beneficial to South Africa's economy, even though the perceived political stability of the country may decrease because of warring political factions. Let us move to scenario 2, the socialist revolution. This is the least likely of all scenarios, as some of the socialist policies that the ANC has implemented in the last decade have proven to be quite unpopular with the average dissatisfied non-voter, such as holding onto state control and ownership and seeing all those state-owned entities collapse, SAA, Eskom, that does not have a good image on the socialist ideal. Moreover, most people are creeped out when they actually start thinking what socialism really is. It is about the state, who will own and control everything in the people's daily lives, like in North Korea. Either way, if that were to happen, we would probably have something that looks like this. The left-wing parties, from the moderate ones like the ANC and Good, to the more extremist ones like the EFF, would be gaining the most of the 13 million new votes, and libertarian parties like the DA and IFP would be gaining the least. In fact, in this scenario, the EFF would take over as the second largest party in South Africa from the DA. At this point, we are likely to see a rise of an ANC-EFF alliance to promote maximum state control and ownership of anything and everything. Scenario 3 is the exact opposite, a free market revolution. This scenario assumes that the average South African non-voter is strongly looking to reduce the state's involvement in citizens' daily affairs. Perhaps they are trying to open a small business or support the existing small businesses they have around them. They may want South Africa to become a global center of attraction for internal and foreign investments, in the hope that these will create many needed jobs and lift the economy from its current stagnation. The parties that support a free market economy, where single and independent businesses are central as opposed to the state, are likely to gain the most of the 13 million new votes in this scenario. This is the scenario where the ANC is most likely to be unseated as the largest political party, even if by the smallest margin, because votes are concentrated to a few specific parties who are directly opposed to what the ANC and other left-wing parties stand for. A free market political alliance made up of the DA, IFP, ACDP and either the VF Plus or African Transformation Movement may arise to form a new government. The last scenario I drew up is that of a rebellion to the establishment, which I believe is the most likely of all four. The scenario assumes that the average non-voting South African in 2019 is disappointed with the largest parties, the ANC's all talk, no action policies, the DA's constant pursuit for nothing of their own and only opposing anything the ANC does blindly, and the EFF's unstoppable divisiveness and destruction of the social fabric as their solution to rebuild a better South Africa. That means that in this scenario, the big winners are the unusual ones. Everyone but the biggest parties. This shakes up the political atmosphere like nothing had before. We see the IFP taking over the role as the third largest party from the EFF, and in fact closing in on the DA as a potential second place in future elections. Of all scenarios presented today, this one is the one where it is most likely for the ANC to remain the largest party, but also the one where it will struggle the most to form a coalition with like-minded parties. We have seen four scenarios, and while these are very different from one another, they all have one thing in common. The final electoral result is hugely different to that of the real 2019 election results. Thus, this is exactly my response to the "my one vote does nothing" claim. Your one vote does a lot if you actually cast it. Because if you keep thinking it doesn't, I'm sure then other millions of people will think so too, and until this false mentality is out of your mind, you effectively ensure that the people that died and sacrificed their life for everybody's voting right have done so in vain. If millions of individuals selfishly and carelessly keep to determine that there is no hope for South Africa, then the country may actually lose its hope. Not because there actually isn't any hope, but because people induce hopelessness with their lack of involvement in society. But please note, you do not have to be wealthy to be involved in society. Neither need you to be a fancy university graduate or anything like that. You just simply need to respect your free civic duty and cast your ballot. Be it a super tiny party or the largest of all, it does not matter. Vote for the party who most closely resembles your values. I heard people saying, "No party interests me, no party resembles my values," so many times, but this is not an acceptable excuse. Why so? There were 48 political parties contesting the 2019 general election, ranging from far left to far right, from socialist and Marxist-Leninist to capitalist and economically liberalist, from Christian to Muslim to irreligious, from conservative to liberal, and so the list continues. I am 100% sure that at least one of those 48 parties appeases your values more than the others. Pick that one and vote for it. Your vote makes a huge difference. On that note, it is so crucial to realize that the phrase "your vote makes a difference" is actually so much more than just a slogan or a cliche. Your vote is your voice to decide on the quality of life you want for yourself and your community and even future generations. Voting is your chance to stand up for the issues in your community life. Take the time to help decide what is best according to you. Voting, rather than just venting on social media or protesting, is the best way to make your voice heard and make a positive input and impact on the issues that concern you. Not voting means you are giving up your voice on how things are done in society. The people who go out and vote, remember, are the ones that decide election outcomes. If you do not vote, someone else will make the decision for you. If you do not vote, you are stuck with other people's choices and you cannot even complain about it because you let it happen by not voting. And if you're thinking that right now you have better things to do with your time and you'll vote next time, think again. 5 years is a very long time to be stuck with something that you do not want or does not work for you. Remember, you pay taxes whenever you buy anything. But do you know how that money is being spent? Well, guess what? Most people have no idea. Voting is your chance to choose how your taxes are spent, such as funding for social services. Do you think instead it should go to defense or healthcare or schooling? History shows that democracies in danger of losing their freedom register frighteningly low voter turnouts. In thriving democracies, people vote in large numbers and the people's voice remains supreme. Democracy only works if people participate in it actively. This sounds obvious, right? But people need to actively participate in the process for it to work, otherwise democracy does not work. Democracy needs constant renewal among citizens to make it flourish. So, if you are a South African citizen in possession of a valid ID book, ID card or temporary identity certificate and are at least 16 years old, you can register on the voters roll. To register, get in touch with the local IEC office in your area or wait for the registration drive weekend, which is Saturday 17th July and Sunday 18th July. In this weekend, voters are given the opportunity to register at voting stations, which, because there are so many more, they are also more likely to be a lot closer to where you live than the nearest IEC office. You can vote at the upcoming local government election if you are 18 when the election takes place, which is on the 27th of October. This means that even if you're 17 years old now, but turn 18 on or before the 27th of October, let's say in August, you can vote in this local government election, and as we've seen in this video, you should. Voters who are already registered to vote are reminded that the click, check, confirm facility on the Electoral Commission website can be used to amend their registration details. Over 350,000 voters have used it since its launch in 2018. So in conclusion, register if you're not already and vote, because your vote is the ticket for a better South Africa. Not voting means that the same old career politicians which everyone complains about, I've heard people complaining about politicians since I first stepped foot in South Africa back in 2014, will keep going on with their crooked acts. The combined voice of the non-voters could have easily shaken the South African political landscape in 2019, even if the non-voters had voted for smaller parties that patriotically love South Africa as a sovereign nation, value its amazing diversity, and seek its common good. Do not let another election go to waste. Historically, many people have suffered in the name of the people's right to vote. Do not waste the opportunity to make your voice heard. Get up, but most importantly, wake up to South Africa's cry for change. Register and vote, as your vote matters. Thank you.